Cool. So we're just going to wait 1 minute. Thanks everybody that's joined so far. Um, in the chat, uh, if you want to just put where you're joining us from, um, and hopefully you should have access. Great. I can start to see some comments come through. So that's fantastic. So we'll just give it another 60 seconds just to wait or allow a bit of time for any stragglers to join us, and then we will get started. And yeah, I don't know if you've seen, so Anita's just posted in the chat a link to the QR code, which is on the screen as well, the menti.com QR code, so you can have a look at that while we're waiting to get kicked off. Cool. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining, first of all, and welcome to today's Learning Network webinar. We're delighted to have you here. So for anybody who is new to us, the Learning Network is a community run by volunteers supporting learning professionals across the industry with resources, mentoring events, and a space to grow no matter what your experience level. So as you know, we're using Zoom. You've already established that the chat is working. So if you've got any questions, we will have a dedicated Q&A at the end, so you can put any questions in the chat box. There is also a Q&A box as well, which you can use. Today's session is also going to be recorded, so that will be available on YouTube and via the members dashboard after the event. So yes, it's my pleasure to introduce you today, Nick from Edifai, and he's going to be leading a really exciting session today on using AI to develop your skills, your thinking, and your judgment. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Nick and let him take over from here. Thank
Brilliant.
you,
Thank
Nick.
you so much, Arash, and really nice to see you all here. Some familiar names, but also some strangers. I'll introduce myself properly in just a moment. Anita, just several seconds ago, posted a Mentimeter link into the chat. So if you wouldn't mind clicking on that link or scanning the QR code on the screen, we'll come back to that in a moment. Of course, the topic of today is all about learning, which is probably the thing I'm most passionate about. And I'm going to dive into that and why I think learning is ultimately the skill and why AI is such a powerful learning tool. Before we get into anything, however, I want to start with a quick puzzle. So in a moment, I'm going to put two lines up on the screen. They're two kind of horizontal lines, and at the end of each of those lines, there's some little arrowheads. So some kind of snap that way and the other snap the other way. I'm going to put them up for 3 seconds, and I want you to pop in the chat whether you think the top line or the bottom line is longer. All right, here are the lines. Cool. Quickly in the chat, tell me top or bottom, which one was longer? Okay, Richard said the same. Lisa said the same. Dan and Jennifer have also said the same. In a few seconds. Sanjay says, I know this one. Both are the same. Ruth's challenging the trend here and saying the bottom. But it seems like we've got pretty big consensus around both of the same. Son, you actually said, I know this one. Who thinks they know this one? Who thinks they've seen this puzzle before? Imagine many of you probably do. And I actually tricked you, which is not always a good way to start a session like this. I completely fooled you. The top line is indeed longer. But the reason I'm guessing many of you said the same is that you probably feel like this is a puzzle that you've seen at some point in your life or in your career, in your childhood. And I often think of this, particularly going into a session where we're talking about learning and growth mindset, as a really important, critical part of framing what we're here to talk about today. There's a guy called Edward de Bono. He calls himself the modern godfather of creativity. He's a very modest man, but he talks about this concept that he calls rivers of thinking. And that is that when we're young, knowledge falls onto our heads, onto our brains, much like rain would fall onto the top of a mountain. Now, over time, that rain starts to form rivers in the side of the mountain. And as we get kind of older and more set in our ways, those rivers become more established and etched into the side of the mountain. And so our thinking tends to follow these paths. Much like if you've ever, you drive a car every day and you get home and you can't remember whether you stopped at any red lights. So these rivers of thinking are brilliant because they allow us to autopilot. They allow us to drive the car without having to necessarily think about it. But sometimes they can also really challenge us, like this puzzle just has. We think we've seen it before, so therefore we automatically assume the answer is X. And really, what I want to encourage you to think about today is two key things. Really, how can we step outside of those rivers? And we're going to do that through both provocation, which is asking yourself some questions, or even using AI to ask you questions, and stimulus, giving you some examples, or asking AI to give you examples that can help you learn, that can help you change the way that you think. And that's really something that's crucially at the crux of my career. So to formally introduce myself, my name is Nick. I'm the CEO and founder of Edifai. We're a learning and development company focused on AI skills here in the UK, but I've spent most of my career, about 2 decades, working in learning. And it's the thing that really I get excited about, this ability to kind of grow and to change. Most of my career has been in the space of digital transformation, really at the intersection of technology and people. To be honest, I'm not a super technical person. I am really interested in how technology changes behavior. And over the years, I've run many, many sessions just like this, really getting people to embrace or turn some of the fear around technology into curiosity that can really help them do things in a different way. Yeah. We are very much at an inflection point with AI. I mean, you literally can't look at the news or go anywhere without seeing AI. We're right at the top of the hype cycle around artificial intelligence, particularly with the frontier models, Claude and ChatGPT and so forth. It just seems to be a bit of an arms race. What I think is really important is technology is advancing at this exponential pace. Our adaptability is slower. And we reach this inflection point where kind of technology is outstripping, it's becoming the smartest person in the room. And I think in some ways that can be terrifying as much as it is exciting. Some of you might remember this. I'm not sure who here is, I don't know, was around for this. But this was a very famous example of Deep Blue, which was the first time a computer beat a chess player. It was in 1997. And I think this was a really interesting turning point for artificial intelligence because it was for the first time people realized that computers could work with humans to become smarter. Now, the technology has progressed an incredible amount in 30 years. I feel like it's progressing an incredible amount every 30 days. But there is a real tendency, I think, there's a lot of stuff that we hear of, is AI making us lazy? Are we just now defaulting to a tool like ChatGPT to outsource our thinking and to do the work for us? And we see this happen all the time in companies that we work with. And I think there's a really, again, we're all learning professionals here. This is part of the learning network. I think the real crucial thing that I want you to walk out of today's session with is not how can I outsource my work to AI, but how can I use AI to teach me to be better at my job as a learning professional? Let's try a quick activity to try and bring this to life. In the chat, I'd like you to write a sentence to explain inflation to me in simple terms without using the words supply, demand, or rise. Whilst you do that, I'm going to open up Claude. I'm going to ask it to do it. So in the chat, explain inflation to me in simple terms without using the words supply, demand, or rise. Costs go up in line with market trends. Thank you, Dan. Increase of prices. Nice and short and sharp there, Sarah. the rate at which prices across the basket of goods increase or decrease over time. Thank you, Mark. All right, let's give Claude a go. All right, it's going to think for a few seconds here. It's going to give us a much more detailed answer, likely. Okay, brilliant. It's given me a pretty good story around the price of inflation. It hasn't used any of those words that I've asked for. Arguably, in the time that it took it to do that, uh, was quicker than anyone could actually type what they wanted into the chat box here. But I do think it's an interesting example when we think about the idea of AI being the smartest person in the room. Um, of course, we're seeing a lot of kind of, this is not a perfect answer, but I could just take this, copy and paste it, and call the job done. That's what we refer to nowadays as workflow. Because people are just tending to rely more and more on these tools without that kind of human critical intervention. And the truth is that it is probably making us a little bit lazy. So the question is, if AI is the smartest person in the room, how can you learn from the AI? And I want to start this off with just kind of an open question. Has anyone here used one of these tools recently to encourage their own learning or their own development? And if so, how? Also waiting for some of those to come through, let me tell you a little bit about my career. So I mentioned before, I've worked in the space of learning for about 2 decades. I often thought my career would be quite linear, that, I would kind of progress up a ladder of sorts, but it's actually been an absolute mess. It's been all over the place. I've had highs, I've had lows, I've changed companies many, many times. It's what you'd refer to as kind of a squiggly career. When I started Edifai, which is about 4 years ago, and I kind of assumed the CEO position, I was never actually really equipped to be a CEO. I've had to learn faster and harder than I've ever had to in my life. Now, my career trajectory has just gone on this incredible upward spike. And I'm doing things every day that I'd actually have no idea how to do. Now, I'm very fortunate that I work in a world where we have this kind of democratized access to these AI tools, to these large language models. But rather than kind of outsourcing my work, it's really important that I'm building the skills to be a CEO. Yeah. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you today are things that I do day in and day out that really help me rehearse or practice, get my own brain firing around the stuff that I need to do. And not all of it's glamorous. Some of it can be quite laborious. There are things as a CEO that you have to do which are not the most fun. But again, trying to develop that reflex or that skill is really, really important. So some things that I've recently learned on how to do. So I learned that minus 40 degrees is the same in Fahrenheit as Celsius. I actually found that out at the pub quiz. I learned how to build a web app. I can't write a single line of code. But I've managed to build an entire operational employee portal for the employees at Edifai. Aprendí a hablar español. It's a work in progress, but I'm learning to speak Spanish. And I've also learned how to run a company. I think what's important here is that those three last bits, which are pretty big things to try and learn, I've done all of those with the help of AI. And I'm going to share with you today how I've developed those skills. So I've seen a few examples coming through here about breaking down references for painting, Gemini to give me a podcast listening. I'm actually going to show off Gemini and Notebook LM a little bit later on. Using Claude to help refine your thinking for a master's degree, giving you feedback, which is great. Evaluating work, Tiniola, which is fantastic. So, and of course, baking sourdough bread. It's a great way, getting it to walk you through that process. So at the start of the Menti, we asked you to share share a skill or something that you're hoping to learn a little bit more about. For some reason that hasn't loaded. Give me a moment. Let's just bring that up again. No, that won't load for me, but let me read out what some of the people answered. So some of the things that people would like to learn more about. Using AI for personal development, learning when context is changing so fast, and music production. There's some really interesting examples in there. Again, keep them coming in or type in the chat if there's something that you feel that's missed. I want to talk a little bit about why I think learning is the skill. As someone, I've kind of seen in some of those responses there, the pace of change is unbelievable. I feel like every kind of month in the world of AI is like a year was in digital transformation. We're an AI company, and I struggle to keep up with the latest of what's happening. And I think this kind of comes back to this classic idea of having a growth mindset. And that's the only thing that you can do in a pace of change. For those not familiar with the concept of growth mindset, it's the idea of seeing learning as an opportunity, of being able to put in effort, being comfortable with dissent, realizing you don't need to have all the answers, and being really open to feedback, whether that feedback is from a human or from an AI. I think that this is the single most important skill that we can develop. And I'll talk right at the end of the day about why curiosity, I think, is the biggest career advantage that anyone can have at the moment. But this ability to keep learning, to keep questioning ourselves, to keep pushing the envelope. I mean, you can't break AI. So really encouraging yourself to just try things out, even if they're not perfect, but also don't accept what it's giving you as the final response. I want to share with you a little bit of a learning framework. I think many people on this call are probably familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. And it talks about the idea of how learning happens. It's one of the most cited learning frameworks in the world. Quick show of hands who's actually heard of this before. It's always good to, otherwise I might not labor it too much if everyone here kind of knows what Bloom's taxonomy is. I've got no responses, so I'm going to assume no one knows what it is. Okay, Ruth says yes. So
Yeah, quite a few
basically,
people's hands went up.
oh, cool, Paul. I didn't see it. Didn't see that happen. Sorry, Rash. I could see lots of people done it yesterday. But basically, it hypothesizes you need to move from the bottom of the pyramid to the top to develop a skill. And I've used an analogy here of learning to play guitar. At its most basic sense, you can remember a fact, or you can recall something, which is obviously lower than understanding something, which then goes through to can I actually apply that knowledge into a real situation? Can I analyze? Can I critique something? And then I can actually create something new. When you look at Bloom's taxonomy in this sense, where do you think AI adds the most value to a learner? Do you think it's at the bottom phases of the pyramid? The remember and understand? Do you think it's more on the application and analysis? Or do you think it's more on the kind of create and evaluate stage? Karen says all. I want to challenge on that. Where do you think you can use AI? Yeah. I mean, there's many different answers to this. I think there's a hard and fast right answer. The truth is, it can probably help you with most of these things, but it really comes down again to understanding the tool, understanding the capabilities, understanding how to prompt effectively for what you're trying to do. So over the next half an hour, I want to talk you through kind of some ways that you can use AI to develop yourself. Yeah. So rather than just kind of treating AI as this tool, how can you actually work with it to develop the human brain? I read a stat the other day, and I don't know if this is true or not. It might be a little bit oversighted, but they say AI is of course trained on everything that's on the internet, but they say less than 5% of human knowledge is on the internet, which means that 95% still exists in people's brains. And again, it's about trying to use the AI to unlock that. So we're going to talk about kind of three areas here. Using AI as a coach. So getting it to kind of coach you at doing something, which can really help you develop your thinking. using AI as a gym, which is developing skills that you used over and over again to make you better at them. And then AI as a mirror, which is a bit more around kind of creative brainstorming, asking AI to critique you, not just confirm you. Developing your own judgment with AI, which is really the upper part of the pyramid that I spoke about before. So let's start. Um, let's start by talking about AI as a coach. And again, like I said before, this is about not trying to outsource your thinking to AI, but actually work with AI to become better at something. There's another story I love, and again, I don't know if this is true. It's something that I've heard a few times, and it tends to get bandied around about this man here. You can tell me who this is. It's not a yes. Hopefully, it's pretty recognizable. The story goes that someone asked Einstein to solve a particular problem, and it was a maths problem. And the first thing that he did was he pulled out a calculator. Now, that's not actually a picture of Einstein holding a calculator. It's something I generated before this. And someone said, "Oh my God, but you're Einstein. Why would you be using a calculator to do this?" And he said, "Well, why wouldn't I use the calculator? We've got this amazing tool that can allow us to do this much better than we ever had before." And people were flabbergasted. And I kind of think of AI a little bit like that. It is a tool. We're not expecting you to go and do things completely from scratch, but it's about the tool giving you some information that can help you kind of become better. So some things that we're going to talk about here with AI is using it to test you and correct you in real time, specifically around around a topic that you're trying to learn about. Building skills by giving you feedback, and then turning materials into structured learning plans. Not everyone learns in an audible or visible way, or getting you to think about a little bit, other ways. Someone mentioned podcasts earlier on, that you could get AI to train you on something. So I'm going to do a quick live demo now. I mentioned earlier that I've been trying to learn Spanish. I spend half my time in London, despite my Australian accent. I spend half my time living in Buenos Aires in Argentina. So trying to learn Spanish is something that's quite challenging. And I'm going to show you now quickly how I can do a single prompt, single shot prompting with Claude, where you can use a tool of your choice to build a Spanish speaking app for myself. Single shot prompting is quite important. So rather than having kind of a conversation with the AI where you're trying to build something out, the single shot is trying to get it in one go. So my prompt is as follows. You're my personal Spanish teacher, specializing in Argentinian Spanish. I'm a complete beginner. I'm not going to read all this out. Here's some rules that I want you to follow. I want you to begin with lesson 1 and guide me step by step. Okay, we're going to jump back over to Claude. And I'm going to take that prompt. They say never work with animals, children, or AI. So I'm going to give this my best go. All right. Single shot prompting. We'll give it a moment. Brilliant. And here we go. It's basically turned Claude now into a Spanish tutor for me. It's taken the cue of the fact that I'm looking for Argentinian Spanish. It's used the old ciao instead of adios, which is typical Spanish for goodbye. It's asked me some questions. So I'm going to say hola, ciao, and it will now interact with me again off a single prompt. And you haven't got any kind of ideas here, maybe of something that could go and do Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever it is that you've got access to Gemini, of something that could, in a single prompt kind of gets the AI to teach them. I'd like you to show you taking this a step further. And I've actually now moved over to Claude Code, which I'm not sure if everyone here, anyway, has anyone here played with Claude Code before? So I ran a very similar prompt just before this session using the desktop app. We use Claude as an organization. For some reason, it's not letting me share my Claude application. So you're gonna have to trust that I've run a very, very similar prompt in the Claude app. But it has essentially output this for me. This is again off a single prompt. I've asked it to label it as Edify. Again, I haven't written a single line of code here. I have just let Claude do its work. It took about 8.5 minutes to build this. But off a single thing, it has built me an entire functional. It's picked up the Argentinian cue. If anyone's been to Argentina, you'll recognize that as a mate cup at the top there.
Hola.
Hopefully you can all hear this coming through as well. It's actually giving me verbal cues to the question about before. Empezar saludos.
Hola.
Hola.
Buen día.
Entiendo. And it's giving me the pronunciation of
Ciao.
these as well. It's giving me like XP stars and structured lesson plans and so forth. That's all off a single prompt and deployed, in this case locally, but I could push this live to the web. This is how fast this technology is progressing. And so if you haven't had a play around with Claude Code, or Lovable is another fantastic tool, like a no-code tool, it's pretty impressive stuff. Any kind of questions around that before we kind of push on?
I think Ruth has got a hand up. I don't know if you want to pop your question in the chat, Ruth.
I'll be a question in the chat, Ruth, and we'll try and pick it up later on. As I mentioned before, I've built an entire quite complex employee dashboard for Edify that includes holiday tracking, OKR tracking, organizational charts, wikis, and so forth, all just by sitting down with Claude Code for an afternoon and building it out. And I'm not able to write a single line of code.
Do have a
A few
few.
questions. Yeah, there's a few questions coming through. Um, so Sonia, the app that I just created is hosted locally on my machine, but I can deploy that quite simply using a tool like Railway. Um, Again, I can get Claude to do that for me. And Ruth, I mean, it's all a matter of perspective, whether you think Claude or ChatGPT is better. I find ChatGPT's writing tends to be a little better than Claude, but Claude tends to be a lot more functionally able than ChatGPT, particularly if it's connected in with your apps. The next thing I wanted to show you is about kind of turning material into a structured lesson. And for this, I mentioned before, we have different learning styles. Not all of us necessarily want to watch a video. Some of us want to read a document. Some of us want to listen to a podcast. So there's a fantastic cool tool called Notebook LM from Google. Quick yes in the chat if you've used Notebook LM before, if you've come across it, or a no if you haven't. Cool, a few people loving it. If you haven't come across it before, let me give you a quick demo of how it works. So here, it's very meta, but I've essentially uploaded the PDF of the session that I'm delivering right now. I just drag and drop that into Notebook LM. It's a free tool. And you can see here immediately it's read the deck. It's given me a brief summary of it. But then over here in the studio, I have these different things that I can do with that piece of content. Yeah. So, for example, I've generated an audio overview. I'm just going to play this for a minute.
It's funny, but whenever humanity encounters a massive leap in technology, there is this immediate, almost biological instinct to just use it for outsourcing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We want to hand off the work as fast as possible.
Right. Think about the washing machine, for example. When that first hit the market, nobody bought one with the goal of becoming, a more skilled laundress.
Yeah, no one was looking to improve their scrubbing.
Never have to scrub a shirt by hand again. We completely outsourced the
So that is a podcast completely generated off the content of the deck that I'm presenting to you right now. But similarly, I can generate things like mind maps, infographics, flashcards, quizzes, and so forth. So, if you have some learning materials and you're interested in, exploring different ways to structure that learning or to test yourself on it, Notebook LM is a fantastic tool. And I strongly encourage you to check it out. So you can see here my mind map. It's broken down to A as a coach, A as a gym, A as a mirror. It's done this all automatically for me. Structured learning plans, and flashcards and so forth. So a really cool tool if you've not played around with it before. I want to keep those questions coming in the chat if you want to know anything more about anything that I'm showing off today. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about using AI as a gym. And this is about, I guess, AI can make our lives very easy, which is great, but sometimes you want to create a little bit of resistance for ourselves, because that resistance is what helps develop our skills further. So some ways I can think about using AI as a gym is asking it to make things more difficult for you. Yeah. Using it to rehearse before performing. I'm going to show you a couple of really cool features, AI tools that I play around with there. And helping it to encourage you to push past your first draft. Like I mentioned earlier, this idea of work stop, which is where people just generate content with ChatGPT and they just stick it up and they just think that it's done. Actually, how can you ask AI to push you past that? Before we jump into any of these demos, I want to share with you a quick video. This is a great video. It's Steve Jobs in 1979 when they first launched the Mac computer. And why I love this video so much is I think what he says is so pertinent to where we are right now when it comes to AI. Check this out and then let me know your thoughts.
The best analogy I've ever heard is Scientific American, I think it was, did a study in the early 70s on the efficiency of locomotion. And what they did was for all different species of things on the planet, birds and cats and dogs and fish and man and goats and stuff, they measured how much energy does it take for a goat to get from here to there, right? Kilocalories per kilometer or something, I don't know what they measured it in. And they ranked them, they published a list, and the condor won. The condor took the least amount of energy to get from here to there. And man didn't do so well, came in with a rather unimpressive showing about a third of the way down the list. But fortunately, someone at Scientific American was insightful enough to test man with a bicycle. And man with a bicycle won. Twice as good as the condor, all the way off the list. And what it showed was that man as a tool maker has the ability to make a tool to amplify an inherent ability that he has. And that's exactly what we're doing here. It's exactly what we're doing here.
This is some very wise words there from Steve Jobs, particularly given that video was 40 years ago. But I think, again, it's about this idea of AI being this tool that can make us go faster, but in efforts of making us go faster, also using it sometimes to create that resistance so we can move faster on our own. So just some general kind of hints and tips here. I see people prompting all the time saying things like, can you explain this to me simply, or tell me like I'm 12. Yeah. Or can you summarize this really briefly for me? Ask it questions like, can you make this more complex? Can you tell me what's missing from this? This kind of questioning with AI in your prompting will actually help you build those skills yourself. And encourage you, again, there's loads of examples of how to bring this to life. But getting it to challenge your thinking. When it comes to kind of rehearsing things, a couple of quick things here. So firstly, a PowerPoint. If you're a Microsoft user, there's a fantastic feature which not many people know about called Presenter Coach. You can access this through the slideshow tab on the ribbon, but it basically will put your PowerPoint into presentation mode. You'll make your way through it, and then it will use AI to kind of grade you and give you feedback on how you're actually presenting, whether you're using filler words or just fluencies like R, We're using repetitive language, a pace of speaking, and so forth. So really nice little feature that's just baked into the Microsoft suite there. Anyone who used PowerPoint Coach before? The feature that I think is really mind-blowing that I want to kind of share with you today is the proliferation of what they call kind of AI avatars, or real-time avatars, which are basically AI-generated people that you can have a conversation with, that you can get to kind of test your knowledge on something. So one of our regular Edifai collaborators, Toby Sinclair, he's launched a platform called Real Talk Studio. I'm going to try and do a little bit of a live demo of this for you, so you can get a feel for how this actually works. But essentially, I've asked it to interview me as if I was applying for a job to work in an Argentinian travel agency. So let's jump over here. I'll fire this up. Hopefully this will all work. Great. So it's going to give me a little bit of a preamble.
Hey, it's great to meet you. Before we begin, just some housekeeping. I'm an AI avatar, so I might occasionally do weird things. I apologise if I interrupt or talk over you. I'm open to feedback, so if you want me to do something different, please tell me. Now that's over with, I will start the conversation. Thanks for joining on time. We'll keep this tight. I'm looking for specific, measurable examples tied to promoting Argentina in English-speaking markets. Ready to begin? Hey, it's great to meet you. Before we begin, just some housekeeping. I'm an AI avatar, so I might occasionally do weird things.
This is why they say don't work with children, animals, or AI. She's gone on a little bit of a tangent there, but you get the idea. And again, if you want to try out Real Talk Studio, you're keen to have a go with it, give us your details at the end of the session. We're more than happy to set you up on an account so you can actually try that out. Okay, we've only got about 10 minutes left, and then we're going to pause for a bit of Q&A. So before we kind of go, I just want to talk about this last piece, which is using AI as a and really, again, allowing it to sharpen your judgment and asking it to critique you rather than just confirm you. A few ways you can do this. So stress testing ideas, exposing your blind spots, or again, inviting it to critique, not confirm. I'm sure you've all heard of the idea of like bias with a lot of large language models, which is, the fact that they've been trained on a certain set of data, and the fact that we ask questions in a particular way that we're asking it, it's always like, that's a great idea. Fantastic. One of my friends the other day was asking ChatGPT. He was basically saying he had a business case, a business idea that he wanted to start selling turd on a stick. And ChatGPT was like, what a fantastic idea. So, it's just these models are trained to agree with you with some inherent problems. I saw this post the other day. It's one of my favorite authors, Daniel Pink. This is actually on Instagram, of all places, where he said, it can help you work, but I wanted to turn them as superpowers for myself to expose my blind spots and help and realize that I tell myself the exact ways that I'm playing small. So basically asking a large language model to really critique you. Now, I'm not going to live demo this because it isn't very personal, but if you're really brave and you use one of these tools day in, day out, ask it one of these questions like, what do you know about me that I don't know about myself? Or can you do a SWOT analysis on my life? What do I do secretly for others that I might be guilty of myself? What advice do I give to others that I'm terrible at following myself? Where do you see me in 5 years? These are big existential questions. You'll be surprised how much it actually knows. So proceed with caution and do this if you're brave. But certainly the SWOT analysis that I asked Claude to do on myself was pretty damn revealing. So very, very interesting. I want to do one more quick live demo with you now. And I'm actually going to use a tool called Perplexity. Perplexity, very similar. It's a large language model powered tool. The reason I like it is that it is very good at citing its sources and being very transparent about where it's getting information from. And we're going to run a prompt in Perplexity. Again, quick in the chat, who here has used Perplexity before? I like your question, your comment in the chat there before, Dan. You can change your temperature settings in Claude or ChatGPT to challenge you a little bit more. Some are saying never, some are saying yes. So Perplexity is a little bit like ChatGPT and Google search had a baby, for lack of a better description. The reason I like it is that it's very, you can tune it to search for particular sources, but also it's very transparent with where it's quoting information from. So I've taken a typical learning design task here. Imagine that I'm a school teacher and I want to create a 45-minute session plan for teaching students about the solar system. I've written a couple of learning outcomes there. I want people to understand what the solar system is made up of. I want to be aware of the order of planets from the sun. I want them to know that the sun is a star. And I want them to appreciate the difference between planets and 12 planets. Now, rather than just pumping this into a large language model and asking it to build a session plan, I'm going one step back. And I'm asking it to critique them aggressively. Do not validate it as soft. Flag anything that's measurable. Check science articles. Give me resources. Tell me what students are going to challenge me on. And then give me some alternative outcomes, but in a table with like trade-offs on what they would be like. Okay. So let's jump over to Perplexity. And I'm going to run this prompt. Right. So here's the prompt now in Perplexity. I'm just using the free version, just to show you what it will actually do on the free. Again, if you find yourself using this a lot, so it's going to think for a few seconds. Right. Now, the thing that I love, the first step that's done is it's gone to a whole bunch of sources, and I can see exactly what sources it's gone to there. It's got a study.com, it's used NASA, it's used some kind of school resource. It's actually referenced about 10 resources there in a matter of seconds. But it's given me a very quick science check. Tell me my objectives are too vague, partly unaccessible, and scientifically incomplete. It's given me a science check. It's given me some verb critiques. So understand is not accessible. If you're a learning designer, you probably know that. It's too broad. Appreciate is a terrible verb for assessment. So it's now given me exactly what's wrong with those and why they're inaccessible. It's told me what students might challenge. It's given me the table that I've asked for with alternative outcomes and trade-offs. Might be too heavy for 45 minutes. Given me some fixes, and it's given me some suggested follow-ups. Okay. Now, again, it's quite a powerful way to use AI because I'm not just asking it to do something for me and accepting the slot that it puts out, but I'm actually asking it to question my thinking. Any questions around that for me? Any thoughts or ideas that you're kind of curious to go and have a play with now yourselves? It is kind of similar to Claude, but again, the key thing here is that it is citing all those sources for me, and I can dig into those sources quite transparently. Sometimes Claude and ChatGPT have deep research, can be a little bit vague, or they can be going to sources that are not necessarily 100% correct. Yeah. So I just want to, as we kind of wrap up the session, I want to talk about this idea of, curiosity being the biggest career advantage that you've got. The truth is that we are swimming in a kind of sea of sameness. Average has been automated. I mean, you're scrolling on LinkedIn and you'll see obviously generically written AI posts everywhere you look. Yep. And I think as this kind of democratization or this proliferation happens, again, it comes back to this idea we're seeing right now people who have kind of learned and embraced AI, but then just relying on it, are just coming to this kind of, they've had this huge boost in productivity over the last couple of years, but starting to plateau out now. And they're swimming in that sea of sameness. I think it's those people that want to learn this AI and work with it as a tool that are going to have huge growth over the next few years. And there's just huge potential here to rewrite the rule book. I read a really interesting study the other day by MIT, where they looked at 3 sets of students, where they asked them to write an essay, but they actually measured their brain activity. Now, in the first set of students, they only had access to a library, traditional library, but they were asked to write an essay on this particular subject. The second set of students had access to Google search. Now, the third set of students had access to a large language model. Now, it goes without saying that the students who were tasked to write the essay, who only had a traditional, book library, had the highest levels of brain activity versus those who were using Google search, and those who were using the large language model were the lowest. But what was interesting is that they then asked the people who had used the library to write the essay again using a large language model, and the brain activity was off the chart. Now, the reason for that, and if you think about how you break this apart, is because they'd done the task already themselves, they were forced to think critically about it. So when they were given the tool, they were able to prompt and ask questions a lot better than someone who had no idea of the subject matter. And that's really what we talk about when we say learning with AI. There's kind of like one of the people I very much look up to is Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft. Microsoft has had a bit of a boom and a bust over the years. When he took over in 2014, one of the first things that he said is, we're not going to be a know-it-all culture, we're going to be a learn-it-all culture. Yeah, and that is really true of Microsoft nowadays. You can see their share price and how it's grown under his helm of this idea that they're there to learn. They're not there to know everything. So for some closing thoughts, I want to ask the room right now, when are you the most motivated to learn? When are things, when do you feel actually excited about learning? When you care genuinely, okay, right? Let's hear from some others. When it relates to what you need, says Richard. Sonia, if you find AI is giving you too much information, ask it to give you less. I also find it really useful sometimes to add onto my prompts like a word count, or telling it that it should ask me questions before it generates a response. When you feel like you're solving a problem, Karen, which means when you kind of feel like you're contributing something. Anyone else want to type in the chat there? And the output of the learning can be applied so it feels relevant and timely to what you're doing. So I just want to share with you a book. I keep going back to this book, and it was the guy I mentioned earlier on, Dan Pink, and the book is called Drive. Anyone here read Drive? It's about what really motivates us in life, to show up every day, to do a good job. Mark has. He boils it down to kind of 3 main things, which I think are really, really key. We tend to be very motivated when we're autonomous, when we feel like we've got control of something, when we feel like we own it and it's ours. We tend to really be motivated when we feel like we're good at something, which is mastering. And we tend to be really motivated when we have a sense of purpose, a sense of achievement, or we feel connected to the task at hand. Now, I'm not sure that any of these are a massive surprise, but the way this book is written is particularly interesting. And I really want to focus in on that mastery piece, because mastery is an interesting word. It's a bit like an asymptote. Can anyone here tell me what an asymptote is? Very mathematical term. Someone probably brushing off to ChatGPT now. But an asymptote is a curved line that never hits the axis. Basically, it's closer and closer to the axis, but it never actually hits it. It's a specific type of curve. It's like if you had a frog in a room and the frog could jump half the distance of the room, then half of the remaining distance, and half of the remaining distance, and half of the remaining distance. How many jumps would it take before it gets to the other side of the room? The answer is it could never get to the other side of the room as an asymptote. And what Dan Pinks means when he refers to mastery being an asymptote is that it's an endless quest. No matter how good you are at something, you can be better. Tiger Woods, arguably the best golfer in the world, could still be better at golf. Yeah. And I think when we view learning through this lens is really when the unlock happens. Yeah. And I hope, if nothing else, I've kind of encouraged you today to take that ability to learn and to think about these tools not as a way to outsource your thinking, but rather to improve your thinking. My key takeaways are, asking more questions of yourself and of the AI, trying to encourage yourself to run one more version or to push it further, and just to try out these new tools. There's an absolute proliferation of them out there. If you're an L&D professional and you really want to go a little bit deeper on some of the stuff that I've covered today, I strongly encourage you to download our AI for L&D playbook. This is something that we've published that's got direct prompts, some of the ones I've used today and others that you can go and start using straight away with Claude or with ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot, and help you with also some of the more advanced skills like co-work and coding and so forth. So you can scan a QR code on the screen, click the link that Anita has just shared in the chat. But it's a really, really useful resource if you want something to take back to your teams or to share around with other L&D professionals. More than anything, I hope today has encouraged you to think different. That's really what we're here to do. We have about 5 minutes left. I'm very happy to take any questions. I don't know, Arash, if you've got any kind of follow-ups or things that you want to add on.
No, not yet. I guess it's just an opportunity, really. If anybody has got any questions about anything that Nick has shared today, if you want to pop it in the chat, and we can answer it. One thing that I was curious about, Nick, from your experience, I know you shared a little bit about Claude Code. My only experience with Claude and coding has been just asking it to create something in the main sort of screen that you shared earlier. Like, what's the difference? Is using Claude Code just a lot more comprehensive and capable, effectively?
So it will preview what it's building in the
Hmm.
desktop interface if you're doing that. If you want to view it in a browser, you just ask for the local host. Can you give me a local host? It will set up a folder on the computer and then put it into Chrome, so you can actually view it as if it was a website. If you want to take it a step further, you basically just need to ask it to deploy. It gets a little bit more technical, but it's not outrageous. There is a deployment platform called Railway, which tends to be pretty straightforward and works exceptionally well with Claude. So if you just ask it to deploy through Railway, it's just very cheap. I think the hosting is about £5 a month, or maybe even slightly less than
Hmm.
that, but you can actually get your website live, which means you can then share the URL with other people, and Claude can keep editing it once it's in that live environment. So, a very good question, Ash.
Cool.
Any other questions? If there isn't, we can give everyone 5 minutes back. Very great.
Well, I don't think there's any others. So, yeah, obviously, a massive thanks, Nick. We really appreciate you sharing your time and expertise with everybody. As I said at the beginning of the call, this session's been recorded, so it'll be available in our members dashboard and on YouTube shortly afterwards. So if you have enjoyed today's session and you're not yet a member, you can join us for just £29 a year at the learning-network.org for more events and like this and support your development as well. So again, massive thanks to Nick and to everybody for joining us today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you again at another Learning Network event.
Brilliant. And thank you so much
Thanks,
for hosting
everybody.
us. Look forward to crossing paths soon. Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already, and grab that guide. It's super useful.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.